Hey guys, Alex Subhuman here. Very happy to be back at the United Pop Melbourne studios. I heard some of you want to know about compression. What is compression? So in my previous videos on audio basics, we've talked about balancing as one of the fundamental tools for getting your mix in order. When balancing doesn't work, we use EQ. Check out my other video on the basics of EQ. Another fundamental technique for ensuring your mix works is going to be compression. Compression alongside balancing and EQ is something that gets thrown around a lot and not done properly, and it causes lots of problems. It's very hard to balance things if the volumes of those parts continually change over time or are too dynamic, and that's where something like compression can come and help you. In a more simple sense, compression reduces the dynamic range of a sound. We heard that quite a lot. Dynamic range being the difference between the quieter parts and the louder parts. We can use compression to squash down the louder parts and then turn up the signal afterwards. It's called makeup gain. And then the difference between the quieter parts and the louder parts won't be as drastic. It means that when we're balancing, if we're balancing to the louder parts of the sound in with the mix, then they might sound great. And then when that sound becomes quieter, the balance is lost. So we need to ensure we have pretty even dynamic range across all of our parts. Too much similarity in dynamic range becomes very, very boring, and you get the famous sausage for your mix. Appropriate consistency in your dynamic range is going to help you put your pieces of your mix together a lot better. So that's the first main way we think about compression. You have your basic parameters, your ratio, attack, and release, and your threshold. And here's where compression can get quite interesting. Compression isn't just a tool for changing the dynamic range of your signal. You can actually use compressors to shape the way a sound begins, exists, and finishes. For those of you that make synths, you might be thinking, wait, that sounds like ADSR. And you are absolutely correct. Compression can change the attack or the start of a sound, the decay, so from the loudest part down to the sustain part. Sustain is a bit strange when it comes to sounds that already exist in a mix, because sustain generally implies that you're holding a note down, say in synthesis. So the sustain would be the volume at which you've held the note at, whereas in mixing terms, it's kind of maybe more the average body of the sound. And last but not least, the release. That's going to be from a sustain down to it no longer existing anymore. And yes, compression can change those relationships and therefore aid us in building our mix together, improving our balance. In a future video, I want to talk to you about the differences between what a compressor is and a limiter and a clipper. But that's going to be a whole video, because the differences between all three and the applications of each three is very exciting for me, and I want to show you in a special video. But for now, let's jump in and take a look at what compression looks like. Let's do it. Back when I was a wee lad, this is how I kind of began to understand the various parameters of the compressor. Kick and a snare. Our compressor is going to have our ratio, our attack, and our release, and a threshold. Your threshold basically says, this is the gain which I'll accept, and anything above that, I'm going to start compressing. The ratio will basically tell you how much it's going to reduce the signal by once it's gone over your threshold. The attack says once the volume has gone above our threshold, how long once it's breached the threshold before we start to compress. And then the release is once the volume has gone back beneath the threshold, then how quickly do I release the compression? So that's all a little bit strange to hear, or we hear it in practice. Hopefully this will make much more sense. Smash my ratio all the way up to extremes, pretty much turn it into a limiter at this point, to really hear exactly what the compressor is doing. And then I will dial in my attack and release times based on what I can really hear. Makeup, for those of you who don't know, is basically just auto gain back after the compression. So compression is going to bring the volume down, and makeup is just an automatic way the compressor will re-add gain back in. Cool, pretty sharp, snappy drums. Compressor on, ratio up all the way, and let's put the attack all the way to the left. So this is 0.01 milliseconds. So this is as fast as it can compress. Theoretically, it can compress faster because in the digital realm, we have look ahead, but let's ignore that for now. And we'll leave our release on. So we're going to bring the threshold from here all the way down to infinite zero. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to slowly increase our attack time. I want you to take a listen. Lovely, lovely sounds. Can you hear what's happening? Do you know what's happening? What are those little clicks? Attack back down again. Attack back up. Let's go really high up. What's that? Yes, well done. That is the peak information of our drums, otherwise known as the transients. The attack is slow enough to allow the transients to come through before compression happens, right? We're changing the ADSR of these drums. We're allowing much more click to come through on our kicks. This is a very handy technique if you need a bit more transienty click information in your drums. It will help it cut through all of the bass in your track. Release up now and take a listen to that. Let's hear this first one. And put the release much faster. Yeah? Could you hear what's happening there? So what we have is the gain reduction is being held onto with the release of the compressor, and it's not coming back in time to allow the next hit's transient to come through. That's the important thing here. It's not about how it sounds, because this is insane, but it's about listening to the attack and release to make sure our release gives up the compression in time for the next drum hit to come through. Okay, attack and release, you getting it? So I would use compression to reduce the dynamic range of a sound. What does that sound like in practice? Let's take a look. So this is a lead for a song that I'm working for another project I'm doing actually, but it's top secret. You'll find out about that later. Okay, so a little bit weird percussive sound. It's got like the initial hit and then a lot of dynamic range difference here. This is the reverbs and delays. Let's take a look at shaping the sound with our attack and release. Let's put the attack very fast, so we're taking off the initial transient of the sound. Let's turn it off. Go on. So with a very fast attack and getting, this is 5 dB of gain reduction, we're changing the way this sound starts. It's not as abrupt or as abrasive. It's less transienty, less clicky. Does gain match that? How are we doing without it? So we're actually taking quite a bit of gain off, so we'd put a little bit back this way. So we're actually drawing up a lot more of the quieter part of the sound. We are reducing the dynamic range. Is that actually a good thing in this instance? Probably not, but it's still good just to see what it sounds like. Let's have a visual indication. So let's record in from 11. Compression on. Cool. So it looks like this last part of the sound has been brought up. Visually, it doesn't look like much difference, but you can hear it. It's really changed the characteristics of the sound. Cool. Cool. Lastly, compression can be used to gel multiple sounds together, the gluing of sounds. One of my favorite compressors comes with Ableton as standard. It is the glue compressor, and it is... I use the glue compressor on my master channel for my masters all the time. It is such a good instrument for gluing sounds together. Let's take a listen to see that in practice. Lastly, before we go, I want to show you compression on groups. What we have here is compression on a master bus. So as it's taken in the tracks from the whole of the song, and it's being compressed. Turn this off. Pretty boring. Back on. So let's set up the compressor and I'll show you what I do. I like a slow attack, so I'm allowing those transients through. Remember we looked at those before in the drums, and a very fast release. And I want to make sure my compressor is moving around to the drums. For dance music, it's really important. See there? So what we're hearing is when the synths are playing, the compressor isn't compressing. If we solo those, we're not getting a master bus compression. The compressor on the master is moving to the drums. It keeps things nice and rhythmic. I think of it as like rhythmic compression relative to the track. Soft clip, bring up the makeup gain, about 3 dB. Turn it off. See how the drums and the synths just don't really sound like they're part of the same track. Put the glue compressor on, glue it together. Have a listen now. Lovely! Righty guys, thank you for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure showing you one of my favorite things to do in music, which is compression. I hope this helped you a little bit. If you have any more questions about compression or any problems you might have in your mixes, drop a comment down below and I'll try and help you out. All right. This has been Alex Subhuman here at United Pop Melbourne. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.